Joining us right here on ET Now is the Global Chief Executive of LinkedIn, a platform that I'm sure you've been hooked on for all your professional requirements. Jeff, thank you very much for speaking to us. You're on this whirlwind tour of the Asia-Pacific region, but India specifically, and I think just yesterday you launched 3 customized products for India. This is also the first time customization is happening for a market outside of the United States and China. What does this really tell about the Indian market? How strategic is it, if I may?
Yeah, it's enormously strategic for us. It's our second largest country in the world, measured by LinkedIn members. We're now north of 37 million members, and we also have reached a critical mass of talent within our presence in India. Our country manager here, Akshay Katari, one of our best product people, is the first time we've ever had a country manager who comes with an explicit product background. And you know, you've seen this evolution over time with regard to our presence here. We started, our R&D efforts were more oriented towards quality assurance, which is more the norm. And over time, this is several years ago, that evolved to include network operations support. Also not necessarily unusual, but over the last several years, we recognize there's a real opportunity to be developing applications in India for our Indian members by an Indian team.
That's right.
And you know, yesterday's announcement is that really coming to fruition.
So this is like make in and make for India. But what is the scope you see for products like these for other emerging markets that are very similar to how the Indian consumer or the Indian customer really operates?
Yeah, so LinkedIn Lite would be a perfect example of this, where we're creating the product because of a clear need in market. You know, you've got people and their mobile subscription packages don't necessarily have the storage they need for a data-rich application. They may not have access to a high-quality connection or bandwidth. And so LinkedIn Lite strips away some of the unnecessary components of this so that we can provide access to our members in India anytime, anywhere, and it loads almost instantaneously, regardless of the kind of connection you have. That's going to make a lot of sense in other emerging markets as well. So as soon as we've got the proof points, as soon as we recognize that we know what it takes to be successful with a product like that, we can start to roll it out elsewhere.
You just had a meeting with the Prime Minister, and he's himself a very active social media user. He's on LinkedIn as well. What was that meeting really like? And are there specific issues, because there is such a digital India push here in this country, are there specific policy issues that LinkedIn would want the government to address?
So Prime Minister Modi and his team have been doing an amazing job with their presence on LinkedIn. He's now at about 1.8 million followers. It's the most followers of any head of state, active head of state, on LinkedIn, and they really do a fantastic job in terms of the messaging, the engagement with our membership, and I think it's another example of how this administration really understands the power of these digital platforms in terms of communication and in terms of the impact it can have on the economy here in India. And we're very fortunate insofar as the work that we're trying to get done. There's a very natural alignment with many of the initiatives that the government has been prioritizing. So by way of example, Skill India is an important one, Make in India, Startup India. All 3 of those initiatives align beautifully with our LinkedIn placements announcement yesterday, LinkedIn Lite, and the LinkedIn Starter Pack.
So, you know, these 3 products that you launched for India are very India-specific in that sense. Will we see more products like these? What is the scope that you see more customization could happen in India?
So we're going to continue to focus within some specific themes before we start to expand. Certainly learning and development and ensuring that members here in India can acquire the skills they need for the jobs that are and will be, and not just the jobs that once were. That's going to be a key area of focus for us. Having jobs available on the site, what we call jobs liquidity, the number of jobs that would make sense for our Indian members has increased quite dramatically over the last couple of years. We're going to continue to double down on that area. Continuing to create value for not only small, medium-sized businesses, but startups. Individuals who desire and would like to become entrepreneurs who may need help in doing so. So we're going to continue to focus in those areas.
You know, it's a very obvious question that a lot of people are asked when they come from the US or the Valley specifically. How different are the 2 markets, India versus China? I'm sure your country cousins like an Uber and an Amazon and perhaps a Google or a Facebook will have a story to tell. But how different is it to do business in the two countries?
In China and India?
Yeah.
Well, they each have, first of all, they both reflect enormous opportunities for us in terms of the populations, in terms of the addressable market, in terms of impact on the global economy. But yeah, they're different markets as well. You know, China, you've got so much activity within any one segment of the tech industry or the internet industry. It's extraordinarily competitive. And you need to make sure that the talent that you're assembling within a market like that is up to the task, and they're ready to move very quickly. They're ready to move aggressively. You have to be willing to invest accordingly. You know, within China, it's going to be important more often than not that you have investment partners that can help you navigate that environment.
Right.
There's some very specific things in terms of getting permission to operate in a market like that. In India, we've taken less the joint venture approach and more the wholly owned approach. Our Indian office here is it's a subsidiary of LinkedIn as a global company, but retains its own local culture,
right.
Which is always wonderful to see. And you know, in both countries, there's a lot of focus in terms of creating economic opportunities.
You know, the reason why I asked you this question was that if you speak to a Facebook or a Google, they tell you that China is a far closed market than in India. India is far more open. Does that hold true for a company like yours as well?
Yeah,
you're not a social networking site in that sense. You are social networking, but you're very professionally inclined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So closed versus open, you know, from their perspective, I understand how that makes sense. And that's probably a more macro variable in all this. In terms of our focus, it is about creating economic opportunity. I think that has facilitated our entry into certainly the Chinese marketplace. You've got other companies that find it prohibitively challenging to do business there.
Right.
But what we're trying to do is so well aligned with some of the major priorities within China today, not dissimilar from what we're seeing in India in terms of job creation, in terms of creating opportunity not just for white-collar, high-value white-collar roles, but blue-collar jobs, creating entrepreneurs within rural areas. So there's very strong alignment there.
So what are the key challenges that you see in a market like India? Is a skill mismatch? Is a demand-supply mismatch? A monetization a big challenge for you in this market here?
Monetization, not so much a challenge, less of a priority today. First and foremost, we want to make sure that we have a membership that's reached critical mass at that kind of scale. That's when our members can create value for other members. And once we have those members engaged and we know we're creating the right kinds of value for them, that's when you really start to get focused on monetization. Now, all of that said, we have had a strong presence here across all of our major business lines. Talent solutions, marketing solutions, sales solutions, and most recently, learning and development. So we'll continue to invest in those areas. But first and foremost, we want to get the growth and engagement part of the equation right.
So, you know, when the Microsoft acquisition of LinkedIn was announced, there was optimism levels very high in India because Microsoft also has big plans for India. What are the kind of synergies that you see between what Microsoft has planned for India and what LinkedIn has to offer, both for the enterprise and from an economy point of view?
So one of the things that I think Satya is extremely passionate about is making sure that Microsoft's technologies and their advanced technologies can be utilized and leveraged by all people, not just people that have access in more affluent areas, but also you know, rural areas. And really the folks that need some of those technologies the most in terms of the creation of economic opportunities. So we're certainly excited to partner with Microsoft and the government on any kinds of programs that can accelerate that kind of activity. You know, outside of that, what Microsoft is trying to accomplish in terms of enabling individuals and organizations to fulfill their potential, what we're trying to accomplish in terms of connecting the world's professionals, make them more productive and successful, is already very naturally aligned.
That's right.
So it's less about what we can do specifically in India and more about making sure that the integrations that we want to get done, we're executing on and adding value to people on a global basis, and that of course is going to include India. So that's going to be things like Outlook integration, Windows integration. There's a lot we can do within Office in terms of starting to light up this professional network and the people that you know, staying in touch with those people, asking for help, tapping another person's knowledge, your identity on LinkedIn all of a sudden coming to the fore within these Microsoft products and services. The Dynamics platform, which supports multiple business applications across the enterprise. So much we can be doing to create even more value there.
You know, I know you've said this, that we're not a media company and we have no aspirations to be there, but the truth is that a lot of professionals like to publish on LinkedIn. There are very meaningful conversations that are happening there. So there is a lot of action that's gathering on that space. How are you going to leverage that, even though you insist you're never going to be a media company? You're a social media platform.
Yeah, there's this almost age-old question that you typically get when you operate in Silicon Valley and you have any kind of content offering, which is, are you a media company or a technology
That's right.
company?
Yeah.
And the answer, the quote that you're referring to there was, I was asked very specifically, are we pivoting to become a media company? And no, we're not going to become a media company. We are a professional network. Now, we're a professional network whose core value proposition is enabling our members to stay connected and informed. And a huge part of staying connected and informed is getting the right news, the right business intelligence, the right data and knowledge in front of our members at the right time. So our feed continues to grow in terms of quality, in terms of the overall comprehensiveness. Engaged feed sessions is up quite dramatically year over year. We're starting to see a lot of conversations taking place around this content, which brings that social component to the fore. So that's going to remain.
No temptation of being a media company.
No, that's, you know, 70% of our business, almost 70% of the business comes from recruiting services. Marketing solutions or advertising is just about 20 to 25%. That's where you would traditionally see someone defined as a media business. So no, it's not going to be the core to what we do, but it's always going to be very fundamental to what we do.
Fair point indeed. But Jeff, you know, you run this business like a startup, and I must ask you the obvious question. I know the transaction is still in process, the deal still hasn't closed, but how different is it to be a startup on your own and to now run a startup in a behemoth like a Microsoft?
So from the earliest conversations that Satya and I had, he made clear that one of the first principles for how we're going to do this is by LinkedIn retaining its independence and the ability to operate autonomously. And he meant it, and he's been reinforcing that at every turn. And we're going to try to do this a little differently than some of the traditional M&A you would see at this scale. You know, Microsoft is committed to helping LinkedIn continue to grow, accelerate its growth, and realize the full potential of the platform, realize our mission. And that's what we're going to do. And those integration opportunities I mentioned earlier, since the announcement in terms of the definitive agreement, we've been hard at work in terms of thinking through what's going to be possible here. And what I can tell you, prior to close, you can only do so much, but what I can tell you is we're even more excited about what we're going to be able to do together. And I do think we're off to a really strong start in terms of reinforcing this idea of operating autonomously.
You know, you've said that you're in here for the long haul and you will continue. What is the long haul, 5, 10 years? Because we've seen transactions like these in the past, and the ability to retain the top management and the top talent doesn't always tick the box. So A, what is long haul, and B, what gives you the optimism that you're in this for the long haul?
So the optimism comes from the fact that this is a dream job. You know, I can't think of anything more important right now than the creation of economic opportunity for people in terms of closing the skills gap, in terms of trying to reduce what is increasingly becoming widening socioeconomic stratification. And you think about the number of people in the world who don't have access to economic opportunity, who feel completely disenfranchised, and the ills that can create for society. So this is meaningful work. It's work that matters, and I think we're in a unique position by virtue of our scale, by virtue of our functionality, the applications, by virtue of this combination with Microsoft, and the ability to operate at a scale of north of 1 billion customers. There's so much work to be done that can make a meaningful difference in people's lives. And so, you know...
So what is the long haul?
It's not a specific timetable. It's just, what other job would I possibly want other than this?
I then must ask you this very simple question, that are there any Indian LinkedIn influencers that you particularly like to follow or would want to follow?
Well, that's an easy one. So Prime Minister Modi. Is, I think he and his social media team, and I didn't just tell him this today because I was meeting with him. I've actually talked about this publicly. I think they're writing the playbook for how a head of state can utilize social media to really connect with a broader audience, a populace, connect with people outside their country, to share their agenda, their priorities, what they're trying to accomplish. And it's amazing to watch the level of engagement there, the level of authenticity. And, you know, you meet with the Prime Minister and you can see why he's been able to generate that kind of audience. You know, he can't help but become passionate, and you want to share in that passion in terms of creating economic opportunities, in terms of ensuring that people have the right skills.
Right.
And he's also got a really impressive team that understands how to get the most out of these tools.
You know, I cannot not let you go without asking you the questions on startup, because you come from the Valley. In the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen that scene really hot up in India. About 10 unicorns being created, high valuations. Where do you see the Indian startup scene headed? There's lots of excitement and euphoria around it, but where do you see this headed?
I think it's very early days, and I think the best is certainly yet to come. And that said, it's amazing to see what's happened just in the last few years alone, the acceleration in terms of entrepreneurship, the startup ecosystem here, and the success of companies like Flipkart and Ola and many more. As you said, there's multiple unicorns in this market. So I just came from Bangalore, and the energy there, the number of people with the right skills, the right kind of talent that are attracted to Bangalore and elsewhere within India. In terms of this growing entrepreneurial movement, it feels like it's just getting started, and already by virtue of the population here and the size of the opportunity, you're seeing these companies reach amazing scale. So I think the future is very bright. So
one of the criticisms that's saddled against these startups is that they are largely mental models of the West startups. So there is a Flipkart for an Amazon, there is an Ola for an Uber. Do you believe some of that criticism is warranted, and what can Indian startups do to go away and to ward off that criticism?
I'm not even sure I would characterize that as a criticism. It's more like an observation. And if you're seeing a model that works in another country or another marketplace that is directly applicable to a local market that doesn't benefit from that same application, that sounds like an amazing opportunity. And you can certainly see a number of examples within India of that being the case, and these companies experiencing extraordinary success. Just because you start with a model or an opportunity or an idea that has been first generated in another country doesn't mean that's not going to become more localized and evolve over time to be its own very unique thing within markets. So I think that's a very natural part of entrepreneurship, and I don't think that's unique to India.
There is an entire ecosystem that kind of breeds and kind of generates the talent, and the ecosystem that generates entrepreneurship in the Valley. What will it take for India to do what the Silicon Valley does? And will you, in your capacity as an individual, perhaps as an angel investor, look at funding any of the startups in India? Is that on your radar just yet, or are these early days and you would want to watch?
I haven't seen any. It's interesting. I do angel investing from time to time. I have not seen, I don't have a lot of Indian deal flow. There's not a lot of folks coming to me and saying, now after this interview that may change, but I think the startup ecosystem in India is clearly alive and well. And oftentimes countries, cities want to compare themselves to Silicon Valley, but it's already happening here. I mean, you can see it in the number of companies, you can see it in the talent, you can see it in these growth rates, you can see it in the impact that the companies are having within the country. So I think it's going to be more of the same going forward. And it's not coincidental. If you look at the raw ingredients that make Silicon Valley possible, you've got an incredible university infrastructure and ecosystem there. You see the same here with regard to IIT and a number of other universities like that. You've got a huge addressable opportunity here. You have the right regulatory environment in terms of a government that's highly supportive of entrepreneurial activity. You throw these ingredients into the mix and you see what's possible.
So one last question before I let you go. These are exciting times in the U.S. with the poll pitch and the poll fever rising high, the Trump versus the Clinton camp. Exciting times for the Valley as well. That's watching these polls evolve.
Exciting is one way of putting it.
Because this also breeds the fear that there is this rise of protectionist trend in the world, and for platforms like yourself, that's not such great news, is it?
Well, you want to make sure that marketplaces are open. That's when you're going to see those marketplaces thrive. That's when you're going to see the companies creating those marketplaces doing best and in a position to create the most value. So you certainly hope that's going to continue to be the case going forward. You said it's exciting times. It's certainly a highly dynamic race right now, and it feels like we're in the home stretch, and it's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
Jeff, we appreciate you joining us right here on ET Now.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.